Give us a lowdown on the new S5, man. What is it?
Yeah, so the S4, just to go back a little bit, was last year's major phone, along with the HTC One M or One M1 in the M7 in the Android world. And again, this year we see the same battle between Samsung and HTC. We've got now the S5 and the M8 this year, and they are very good in their own ways. Just to talk about the S5 and what it has over the S4. What was added is it has a little bit larger screen. So we got a 5.1-inch full HD screen on there, which is similar to what the M8 has. We have a fingerprint reader that can unlock the phone, similar to what the iPhone 5S, what they added to the iPhone. And on the back, it has a crazy feature, a heart rate monitor, actually, which is pretty, like pretty gimmicky thing, but another check on the list of features. Is the main point there, but super thin, it's about the same size, pretty similar looking to the S4. A lot of people probably own the S4 out there and are looking to compare it. As far as camera, it's got a great 16 megapixel camera on the S5. The camera is actually a little bit better than the M8, and you might recall that we chatted a little bit about the selective focus feature, where you can choose whether you want to focus on something near or far, and then pick after you take the photo which one you want to be in focus. Well, the S5 has the same thing. Hopefully, that's a feature we'll see on all of the major Android phones. Because
it'll do the same thing that the M8 does.
Yes, yes, it will in that respect, and hopefully that's a feature we see on all phones, because that's a really cool feature. Being able to, it just makes the photo.
It was nice to play with.
It makes the photo look really good. You got a blurred background. It makes your subject really stand out. So the S5 and the M8 both have that. The S5 is actually waterproof for a limited period of time, waterproof and dustproof, which is very unique. The M8 is not. And because of that, you get a little bit more of a rugged design on the S5 compared to the brushed aluminum that we saw on the M8. And that's one of the things that instantly you'll see that when you look at the M8, if you're really into that classy looking.
It looks awesome. It's very industrial in design. And it feels really good. It's heavier than the light plastic phones and that sort of thing. But this is actually constructed better.
Yeah, well, as far as the ruggedness, yes. If you're looking for that waterproof, it has the same plasticky feel that we're used to with Samsung. The same feel as the S4, though they changed the back a little bit, so it's not a little bit better back. It's kind of I don't know what this material is, kind of a better than plastic material.
Okay.
But the same general design on the S5. It's Samsung's plastic that they've had on the Note series and the S series. So they're sticking with that, but because of that, they are able to make it waterproof, which is really cool. It's not waterproof. You can't just throw it in something and pick it up next week. But if you drop it in a bucket of water, or you drop it in the toilet or whatever, like inevitably happens, it will be fine.
Like my wife, every other week, it's nonstop with her. I buy rice not to eat. I buy rice to throw her phone in, so that way it dries out.
Yeah, that can get costly. And battery life on the S5 compared to the M8, they're pretty similar. The S5, I think, has slightly better battery life, and it actually has a removable battery.
Okay.
So you can buy extra batteries and swap them in and out, which you cannot do on the M8. The back does not come off on the M8, so the battery is not removable. And one thing that's really cool related to battery with the S5 is it has what's called the ultra power saving mode. And this is pretty crazy. When you turn on the ultra power saving mode on the S5, everything goes black and white, and it cuts out a lot of the features of the phone, but you can still text, you can receive phone calls. So it's basically like an emergency mode.
Okay.
And when you have that turned on, the ultra power saving mode on the S5, according to Samsung, your battery will then last almost 2 weeks on standby.
Really?
So again,
if you're going to go hiking or you're going to go someplace like that where a phone in an emergency might be very important, you can go into that mode and presumably keep your battery up and working for at least 1 to 2 weeks.
Exactly, and I even tested it. I took the battery down to about 1% and put it in ultra power saving mode, and it lasted over like almost 3 hours on me just in 1%. Wow. So I haven't tested it exactly, but according to Samsung, that can last almost 2 weeks. So that, I think, could be a really cool feature. If you find yourself, not near a charger, not that the battery by itself on normal mode is not good, because it'll get you through a day. But again, you never know if there's, for some reason, you aren't near a charger for a couple days.
We've always been. You're in the middle of something important and your phone is dead, and you're like, Argh!
Yeah, and you just need to make a phone call. You just need to text somebody, or you're waiting for a phone call. That could be a really awesome feature, and I think something that a lot of people would use. And that's called the ultra power saving mode, and that's on the S5. So something that I haven't heard a lot of people bring this up in online reviews and such, but as I've been playing around with it, that's something I noticed.
Yeah, I think that would probably be. I'm surprised that a lot of people aren't bringing that up. Because I think a lot of people would really like a feature like that, because you get down, you're in the middle of a conference call or something of that nature, and you really need your phone to continue to work for you. You can go into that mode and still maybe squeeze out an extra couple of hours. Or if you're going on a trip and you don't know when you're going to be around, or if there's a possibility of you becoming lost and needing to contact emergency personnel, having that in ultra power saving mode, you said?
Yes, that's the name of it.
Then you would be able to go ahead and theoretically have your phone around for a long period of time, just in case you were to need it. Okay, right now it sounds like the S5 is not just a competitor to the M8, but is like squashing the M8. It seems like it has everything that the M8 has, and then it has a heart rate monitor, and then it has this ultra power saving mode. Oh, and it's waterproof.
Yes. There are, in my opinion, I think the S5 is a little bit better than the M8, but it does not blow it out of the water by any means, and I think some people, especially if you're used to an HTC phone, you're going to find the M8 better. One way that the M8 is superior to the S5 is in the speaker. And if you recall,
that's right, great audio.
The M8, it has awesome audio partially because it has front-facing speakers, and not just front-facing speakers, but HTC put a lot of work into making those speakers really good. So that aspect of the M8 blows the S5 out of the water. The S5 just has a normal back-facing mono, really bad. I mean, not horrendous, but it's not as good as the M8 front-facing speaker by any means. So if you're an audio junkie and you play a lot of videos, when you don't have headphones plugged in or that type of thing, or listen to music, the M8 is really awesome with that. Another aspect, the display, of course, they have similar displays. They're both full 1080 HD displays, but because of the way that the displays are made, and I think I may have mentioned this a little bit when I talked about the M8, the M8's colors are not as good. For instance, it doesn't have that deep black that you're going to see on...
It had really good whites, but it didn't have good blacks,
yes,
right?
It had really good whites, but it didn't have good blacks. And with the S5, this is a big upgrade from the S4. Both the whites and the blacks and the colors in between are both really good. So the S5 display is better. It comes out better than the M8.
So it sounds like if you're an audiophile, you're going to go with the M8.
Yeah.
If you're everybody else, you're probably going to go S5 right now.
I mean,
of course, there's the HTC loyalists. I mean, they're a great company. They make really good, rugged phones that tend to last. So, I mean, you might be a loyalist, obviously.
Sure,
but
and if you fall in love with that design, it is really
pretty.
The M8 has a clearly defined design that is different from anything else out there. If you walk into your carrier store and you see that M8 and you fall in love with the design, again, these phones are very similar. They're both really, really good. They have, one thing is better on one, another thing is better on another. I think, in my opinion, I think the S5 is a little bit better. I would go with it over the M8, but either one of them are both really good. They're both available on all the major carriers: Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, AT&T. They're both the $200 range on all those carriers. So
with contract, obviously.
Yes, with contract.
Okay, so we'll go over some of the features, maybe in a little bit more detail, and we'll talk about some other stuff coming up right here on News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel. And so the Galaxy S5, it's kind of like the S4, but they've upgraded pretty much everything just a little bit, and then they've added. Let's talk about this heart rate monitor. Does it take your heart rate on anywhere on your body? Do you have to be holding it in your hand? How does that work?
It gets it from the tip of your finger. And the heart rate thing it's pretty gimmicky because you can actually do this with lots of apps already in the market. It uses your camera flash, and I don't know the technical aspect of it, but you can do basically the same thing that it does already. So it's kind of just a check on the list of features that Samsung has added. And now it does tie into their fitness app, which we're seeing a lot more smartphones get into this, and manufacturers, they're going for the fitness crowd and counting your steps, and now with the heart rate, and it all pulls into the app there. But the heart rate monitor thing, yes, it's built in there and it fits in with the app, but you can basically already do it on almost any Android phone with just an app in the store.
And I think a lot of people look at those apps, like, okay, the metal detector app and things. Okay, they're really gimmicks. They don't really work, that sort of thing. But the other apps in the store for your other Android phone do work for the heart rate monitoring.
They do. They actually work. And that's Again, we've talked about this a little bit before with the difference between Android and iOS is that you have all of these apps that do things like that, and not that there aren't good apps on iOS, but you have all of these apps that take advantage of the hardware more than you're going to find on iOS just because Android is so open.
Right.
For example, one thing I don't like on the S5 is that when you, on the lock screen, by default, you don't have an option for like pulling up, going directly into an app. You can just unlock the screen and then choose the app, which is pretty traditional on a smartphone. But the newer smartphones like the M8, you're able to pull up and go directly into an app from the lock screen, if that makes sense. But since it's Android, there are actually all kinds of apps you can download to do that exact same feature. So while by default the S5 doesn't have that, you've got tons of options in the Android store to add those little icons just on the home screen so you can pull up to go directly into email or directly into Facebook or really any app you choose.
So if you like the M8's design from HTC more, but you really want a heart rate monitor, you can get the M8. You can get an app for the heart rate monitor.
Yes.
You don't have to worry about going to a phone that maybe you don't like as much in the Galaxy S5.
Yes, don't buy the S5 just for the heart rate monitor.
That's just it's just extra thing on there. It's got a great screen, the Super AMOLED screen. Again,
Yes.
It's full HD 1080. Now, the backing on this is something that we've been talking about during the break. Now, right now it comes in black and it comes in white. You've got the white version, and it feels like it's got a little rubbery texture to it. But here's the thing that everybody seems to be really liking online. No fingerprints. You don't have a fingerprint. It totally repels those fingerprints. And if you're one of those people that doesn't go get a case on it, that could be a big deal for you.
Sure. It's probably the best back I've seen on any smartphone ever. Because the problem with the recent smartphones have been running into is they got the glass feel like the iPhone, or it's slippery,
which scratches,
slippery plastic like the S4. Even the M8, it's aluminum, but it's still kind of slippery. Whereas I love the back on the S5. It's not slippery, like you said. It doesn't pick up fingerprints, so it's got a really good back on it.
We've all used the phone on the bathroom toilet. Let's be perfectly honest. You sit there. Maybe you got to reach and grab some TP, you set the phone on your leg, and it slides right off. This is probably, it's going to be less likely for that to happen anyway. And, of course, that also goes into the waterproof feel of it. It's got the dust cover on the bottom, which is kind of annoying, but there's a reason it's there. It doesn't let the water in. Now, talk about the IR blaster, because I don't think a lot of people... Now, this is on the S4.
It was.
But a lot of people don't realize that they have the IR blaster and what it can do. So kind of talk about that.
Yeah, so this is not a brand new feature on the S5, but it's on the S5, it's on the S4, it's on the M8, it's on all of the newer Android phones that are coming out, and it's IR blaster, which basically means you can control your TV just completely with the smartphone. So you can switch channels, you can change inputs. On most TV, if you have a newer TV, it doesn't work on, if your TV is 15 years old, it's not going to work for it. But on newer TVs, especially a smart TV or anything like that, it is an extremely handy feature. It does everything your remote control does. Volume, channel switching, input selection. It'll even give you a directory of shows. It knows all of your local channels that you're picking up or are connected to your TV. So that's a really useful feature that I use all the time, and I don't hear a lot about it, but it's been around for a year. But both the M8 and the S5 have that, and I think that's something that, again, a lot of these features, if you're out there and you're buying a phone, what I would suggest is look up the phone that you just purchased, figure out all it can do, and maybe make a note of what you might use from that, because there is so much that these phones have. Nobody uses all the features. Nobody probably even knows how to use all the features, but there are a lot of things out there that I think the majority of people are not taking advantage of these features. Somebody who might own the S4 probably has no clue that they can change the channel, change the volume.
You really don't hear about that a lot.
No,
you don't hear about the IR blaster at all.
And part of it's just because there's so many features on these phones. Again, look up a review of whichever phone you're purchasing and figure out what all it can do, and figure out what you can use from that, and then make a note of it and figure out and decide how you're going to use it and how you can fit that in.
And again, it's got the 16-megapixel camera on there, which people really like. But how is it in low light? Have you played with it in low light?
A little bit. The M8 actually kind of beats it in low light, but the S5 in full light or in medium light beats out the M8. So, again, you're always going to have this one's better here, that one's better there. I think the S5 camera overall and the features and the editing features and things like that with the selective focus and such is better overall on the S5, but it still does fine in low light.
And the TouchWiz got a little bit of an update as well?
Yes. So TouchWiz is the overlay on Android that Samsung puts on. HTC has the same thing, and all the other manufacturers have their overlays over Android that they each add on top of what Google puts out with Android. And TouchWiz, they're always updating TouchWiz with different features, and it's basically the settings menu, how everything appears. And one thing that I believe we discussed a little bit on the M8 is the kind of the news feed type thing that you can input your Twitter, your Facebook, or certain news outlets into, and it's basically a stream of all of that displays when you scroll to the left of the home screen. And that same idea is on the S5. I believe it was called Blink Feed on the M8, and it is the name is slipping me right now what it's called on the S5. But basically, it's just if you're familiar with Flipboard or any kind of an RSS reader idea, and that's coming by default on the M8 and the S5. So it's kind of a cool thing. You can turn it off if you don't like it, but it's an interesting thing to pull together all sorts of news, and then it shows up in one timeline.
Now, we have the fingerprint scanner on there, this is one of the things that actually Android has followed Apple with.
Yes.
Usually it's the other way around, but this time it's Android going, hey, the fingerprint scanner is probably a good idea. But you have 3 profiles that you can set on the Samsung Galaxy S5's fingerprint scanner. So I can keep my daughter from actually, after I use my phone for the remote, because she loses my remote all the time, I can keep her from getting into my phone, but my wife in an emergency or something like that can actually access my phone as long as I set up a profile.
Yeah, that's the cool thing. You can add 3 fingerprints to the fingerprint scanner, and it actually works pretty well for me. I've seen some people complaining online that the fingerprint scanner does not work part of the time. For me, as long as your finger is straight and you scroll it down on the fingerprint reader, which is on the main button right on the front, which I believe is pretty similar to how the iPhone one functions, it works pretty well for me. Again, I mean, of course, a fingerprint reader is going to be more of a hassle than just typing in your password. I don't think that's most people would agree with that, because you got to make sure your finger is straight on there and that type of thing. I think typing in a password is probably going to be easier, but if you want that extra protection, you don't want to worry about somebody seeing you type in your password, the fingerprint reader is the way to go.
So, I mean, your overall verdict is Samsung Galaxy S5 probably better than the M8, unless you're an audiophile and you really want those speakers.
Sure. Again, always try them out and figure out which one is best for you. And there are proprietary apps that come on each that something like the Samsung Health. It has a whole, that works in with the heart rate monitor and that type of thing, suite of apps that work there. So if that type of thing appeals to you, then the S5 might be the one to go. But the M8 has its own set of things like that. So there are a lot of intricacies within each device that would put it over the top for you. For me, in my opinion, I think the S5 is just a little bit better. If I had to choose between one or the other, I'd go with the S5, but if you like that look of the M8, you like those speakers, which I really love those front-facing speakers.
Yeah, they're awesome.
They're really, really nice, and you get used to them, and then you go back to whether it's the iPhone or another phone where it has a back-facing speaker, and it just sounds really awful. You notice the difference big time.
Now, isn't it funny that we do these reviews on these phones? We spent a half an hour. We haven't talked about call quality at all. I mean, not at all. That's the new. The phone does everything in your life. I mean, it's got the IR blaster. It can control your television. It can control your security system with the right apps. It can turn on your lights, turn off your lights. It does everything. Nobody cares about the call quality anymore.
You can make calls with it?
Apparently.
Oh.
I mean, if
can I do that with mine?
If people still do that, you're right. I mean, call quality, sound okay?
Yes, from what I've seen from the reviews and such, everybody's pretty happy with call quality.
Wait, what you've seen from the reviews? Have you even made a call with the thing?
I think I made one call with it.
You think? Are you sure? You've had it for how long?
Not too long, but the call quality is not usually the first place I go to figure out how good it is.
Isn't that funny, though? We're at a point where the phones, it's like, yeah, I've had the phone for like a week. I've done everything you could possibly do. Have you made a call? I don't know. Have I made a phone call with this thing? I'm not really sure.
What would I make a phone call for?
Exactly. Anyway, we'll post to, obviously, your website and the Daily Show Prep. We'll post to the CNET article. The CNET article has examples of video. It has examples of the photos and some of the features of it. It goes through everything. It's a 2-page review. Really good. And they have an audio file of an actual phone call on there. So... again,
I'll do that next time.
I'm not criticizing. I just think it's so funny that we've spent a half an hour talking about this expensive piece of technology. Nobody cares if you can make a phone call with it. I mean, nobody cares at all. But, John, it's always a pleasure. jhanlon.net is the website. Of course, we'll link to you on Facebook. We'll put you in the Daily Show prep as well. Appreciate you coming in. Galaxy S5, $200, you said?
Yes, $200, both that and the M8, and available on all the major carriers.
And again, the M8, better speakers, comes with more built-in internal storage, but that can all be upgraded.
Yeah.
You cannot remove the battery on the M8, so you can't buy an extra battery. They've gone like the iPhone closed route.
Yeah.
But the Samsung Galaxy S5, again, pretty much does everything really well. You can change the battery if you want. I'll probably buy one of those extended battery cases and things like that. I think probably the coolest feature on that, honestly, is that power saving mode.
It is. That really impressed me. And like I said, I haven't seen a lot of people bring it up. I mean, I'm sure in the really in-depth reviews, they mention it in there. But it was really impressive to me, and it tells you when you turn it on how long it estimates your battery will last once you flip that on.
Yeah.
And another cool feature with the S5 is it has a lot of people are probably familiar with the iPhone's Find My Phone feature.
Yeah.
Well, with the S5, it has when you first set up the phone, you make a Samsung account, which is just like your email address and a password. And along with that, by default, it turns on Find My Mobile, I believe it's called, where if you lose your phone, you just go on to Samsung's website. I'm not exactly sure what the website is, but you could find it by Googling. You just go on to Samsung's website and you put in your email address and password. And by default, the setting is on. It's completely free, and it will ring your phone, vibrate, all that stuff.
And all of the major carriers actually got together recently, and they're working on a kill switch because, we can find the phones now in the United States, and you can kill it in the U.S. The problem is those services typically don't work outside of the U.S., so when somebody steals your phone, they get it out of the country as fast as possible, kind of like when they steal your car. But they're working on it, on having a universal kill switch that'll just deaden the phone. But it's nice to see more security features built in. So if you lose your phone or somebody snags it, you are able to find it in relatively quick order in order to get it back. And, of course, law enforcement's taking it a lot more seriously now as well. Heck, it's like an $800 phone. I mean, you're getting it for $200, but it's like an $800 phone.
Yeah.
And considering everything it does, while it's expensive, seems somewhat reasonable.
And all your private information that's on there,
There's
too.
all that as well. Yeah. jhanlon.net to get in touch with John, and we appreciate you coming in, man. Thanks a lot.
Sure.